Part 1. The charity gala was supposed to be perfect. Crystal chandeliers shimmered like frozen stars above the vast marble courtyard of Viktor Arsenyev's estate. Imported roses lined the balustrades, their fragrance blending with the delicate notes of a live string quartet positioned near the central fountain. Waiters in white gloves glided between guests carrying trays of sparkling drinks and miniature desserts that looked too delicate to eat. Everything had been planned down to the smallest detail. The lighting, the guest list, the press coverage. Viktor Arsenyev did not believe in imperfection. At 38, he had built an empire from nothing. Technology investments, real estate, logistics. His name appeared in business magazines, always accompanied by phrases like, visionary, and, relentless strategist. He had learned long ago that control was the only way to survive. But tonight was not about markets or mergers. Tonight was about his son. 10-year-old Misha stood beside him near the fountain, one small hand wrapped around a smooth white cane. He wore a navy suit tailored precisely to his slight frame. His dark glasses reflected the golden lights around them, hiding the eyes that no longer responded to the world the way they once had. 2 years earlier, a rainy night had changed everything. The car crash had been sudden, violent, and merciless. Viktor survived with minor injuries. Misha survived with scars no surgery could erase. His mother did not survive at all. Since that night, Viktor had poured money into solutions the way other men poured whiskey into crystal glasses. Specialists from Germany, experimental clinics in Switzerland, cutting-edge research trials in Japan. If there was even a 1% chance of restoring Misha's sight, Viktor funded it. But every time, the answer came back the same. Irreversible damage. Money had bent the world for Viktor in every other aspect of his life. It refused to bend for this. Papa, Misha asked softly. Viktor leaned down immediately. Yes. Are there many people here? Yes, Viktor replied, forcing warmth into his voice. Very important people. Misha tilted his head slightly, listening to the layered sounds, the murmur of conversation, the gentle splash of the fountain, the distant clinking of glasses. They sound nervous, he said. Viktor almost smiled. Why do you think that? They laugh too loudly. Viktor followed his son's gaze, though Misha couldn't see where he looked, and realized he was right. The guests were performing happiness, performing generosity, performing admiration for the millionaire who hosted charity galas with the same efficiency he closed million-dollar deals. Cameras flashed. A reporter approached, microphone in hand. Mr. Arsenyev, can you tell us what inspired tonight's event? Viktor straightened. His expression shifted into the polished confidence the world expected. This foundation, he said smoothly, is dedicated to supporting children with visual impairments. My son is my inspiration. Every child deserves opportunity, no matter their challenges. Applause rippled politely through the courtyard. Misha stood still beside him, fingers tightening slightly around the cane. Beyond the tall wrought iron gates of the estate, a different world existed. A colder one. On the opposite side of the street, near a row of neglected trees, a thin boy lingered in the shadows. His name was Ilya. He did not know what a gala was. He did not understand foundations or philanthropy. He understood hunger. He understood cold pavement beneath his back at night. He understood the constant, gnawing fear that someone stronger might decide he didn't belong where he had curled up to sleep. He had been on the streets for 8 months, long enough to stop expecting rescue. Events at the Arsenyev estate were opportunities. When wealthy people gathered, food followed. And when food followed, sometimes scraps remained. Ilya had learned to wait until the end, when staff grew careless and dumpsters grew generous. But tonight, something was different. The gates stood partially open to allow arriving guests through. Music drifted into the street, bright and inviting. Ilya hesitated only a moment before slipping through the opening like a stray cat. He kept close to the hedges, staying low. The estate grounds were larger than anything he had ever walked through freely. Perfect lawns stretched endlessly. Marble statues watched silently from every corner. His reflection briefly caught in a polished window, dirty face, hollow cheeks, oversized jacket that had once belonged to someone else. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand and kept moving. The smell of roasted meat hit him first. His stomach clenched painfully. He hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, a half piece of bread he found near a bus stop. Laughter echoed across the courtyard. Children's voices. Ilya peeked from behind a thick stone pillar and saw a small group gathered near the fountain. Boys in neat suits, girls in pastel dresses, their hair brushed and styled. And at the center of them stood Misha. The other children seemed uncertain. They spoke politely but briefly, glancing at one another as if unsure how to act around someone who didn't react the way they expected. After a few awkward minutes, they drifted away toward the dessert tables. Misha remained alone. He turned his face slightly toward the sound of the water. His expression was calm, but there was something fragile about the stillness in his posture. Ilya frowned. This wasn't what he had imagined. He had expected arrogance, laughter, mockery. Instead, he saw a boy standing quietly in a world too loud for him. Still, bitterness rose like bile in his throat. This boy had everything. Even his loneliness was surrounded by beauty. Ilya stepped closer before he could stop himself. Gravel crunched beneath his worn sneakers. Misha's head turned instantly. "Hello," Misha said. His voice was soft, uncertain, but not afraid. Ilya froze. "Are you one of the guests?" Misha asked. The question struck Ilya like an insult, though it wasn't meant that way. He looked down at his torn sleeves, at the dirt embedded in his fingernails. "No," he muttered. There was a pause. "That's okay," Misha replied gently. "I don't know most of them either." Something twisted inside Ilya's chest. "Can you see anything?" he asked abruptly. Misha's fingers tightened slightly around the cane. "Sometimes light," he answered honestly. "Sometimes shadows. Mostly I remember." "Remember what?" "Colors. Faces. My mother's hair." The last sentence was quieter. Ilya swallowed. He didn't like this feeling, this uncomfortable crack in his anger. He glanced at the flower bed beside him. The soil was dark and damp from afternoon watering. Without fully deciding to, he crouched and pressed his hand into it. The mud was cool, thick, real, unlike the glittering illusion around him. He stood again. "You don't know what it's like," Ilya said suddenly, his voice trembling with something he didn't fully understand. "To have nothing." Before Misha could respond, Ilya reached forward. In one swift motion, he smeared the mud across the lenses of Misha's glasses and down his cheek. The sound of the contact was soft, but the effect was explosive. Misha gasped, stumbling backward. His cane slipped from his hand and clattered loudly against the marble. Guests screamed. The quartet's music snapped into silence mid-note. For one suspended second, the entire courtyard froze. Then chaos erupted. Security guards rushed forward from both sides. A woman shrieked, "Call the police." Victor turned sharply at the sound of his son's startled cry. He saw the mud first. Dark streaks across Misha's face. Dirt dripping onto his pristine suit. And in front of him, a ragged boy with defiance blazing in his eyes. Rage surged through Victor with blinding intensity. He crossed the courtyard in long, furious strides. "Grab him!" someone shouted. Two guards seized Ilya by the arms. He struggled instinctively, fear crashing into him now that the moment had passed. "I didn't do anything," he yelled, though the evidence covered his hands. Victor reached them, his jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. "How dare you!" he thundered, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Ilya met his gaze. For the first time, Victor truly looked at him. Not at the dirt, not at the torn clothes. At the boy, and what he saw was not cruelty. It was fury born from hunger. "He's the lucky one," Ilya spat. The words sliced through the murmurs. Misha stood trembling a few steps away. Mud slid slowly down his cheek. His breathing was uneven. "Papa," he called. Victor immediately moved toward him, his anger shifting into fierce protectiveness. "I'm here," he said, pulling out a handkerchief and wiping gently at his son's face. The mud was cold against Misha's skin. He lifted his fingers and touched it curiously. "It's wet," he murmured. Guests watched, horrified, expecting tears. Instead, Misha began to laugh, soft at first, then louder. The sound was pure and unexpected. Victor stared at him in disbelief. "Misha, it smells like rain," Misha said between giggles. "Like when Mama used to let me play outside." The courtyard fell completely silent. Even the guards holding Ilya loosened their grip slightly. Because in that strange, fragile moment, something had shifted, and none of them yet understood what it meant. Part 2. The laughter did not stop immediately. It rose from Misha in soft, breathless waves, surprising everyone who stood frozen in the golden-lit courtyard. Mud clung to his cheeks, streaked across his glasses, darkened the collar of his perfectly pressed shirt, and still he laughed, as if someone had told him a secret only he understood. Victor felt the fury inside him hesitate. "Papa," Misha said gently, still catching his breath, "it's cold." Cold, not cruel, not horrible, cold. The guards were still gripping Ilya's arms, but their hands had loosened. The boy's earlier defiance had drained from his face, replaced by confusion. He had expected screaming, crying, punishment. He had not expected laughter. Let him go, Misha said suddenly. Victor blinked. What, please? There was something in his son's voice that Victor recognized instantly. It was the same tone Misha had used in the hospital when he had asked the doctors not to whisper outside his room. The same quiet strength he had shown when he learned he would not see again. Victor hesitated. Let him go, he repeated to the guards, though every protective instinct inside him resisted the command. They released Ilya. The boy staggered back a step but did not run. His eyes darted around the courtyard, at the angry guests, the stunned musicians, the security staff ready to lunge again. Why? Victor asked, his voice low and controlled now. Why would you do that? Ilya swallowed. The rage that had fueled him moments ago had burned out, leaving behind something far more vulnerable. Because it's not fair, he said hoarsely. He has everything. A murmur rippled through the guests. Misha tilted his head slightly toward the sound of Ilya's voice. I don't have everything, he said quietly. Ilya let out a bitter laugh. Look around you. I can't, Misha replied simply. The words hung in the air. Ilya stared at him. You can't see, he muttered, as if the reality had only just become tangible. No, Misha said. I can't. There was no self-pity in his tone. Just truth. Silence settled over the courtyard like a heavy blanket. Ilya's fist slowly unclenched. My mom used to say the sky looks different every day, Misha continued. Do you know what it looks like right now? The question caught Ilya off guard. What? The sky. Ilya looked up instinctively. It was deep blue fading into violet, streaked faintly with orange near the horizon. The first stars were beginning to appear, shy and distant. It's dark, he said awkwardly. Blue. Almost purple. Misha smiled. Purple was Mama's favorite color. The simplicity of the statement struck Victor harder than any accusation. For 2 years he had tried to replace what was lost with doctors, treatments, donations. He had built a foundation in Misha's name. He had hosted galas. But he had never asked his son what he missed most. Why are you here? Victor asked Ilya more quietly now. The boy hesitated. Food, he admitted. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Where are your parents? Victor pressed. Ilya's jaw tightened. Gone. It was a word that carried too much weight for a child his age. Misha took a careful step forward, following the direction of Ilya's breathing. Are you hungry right now? He asked. Ilya tried to shrug casually, but his stomach betrayed him with a loud growl. A few guests gasped softly. Yes, he muttered. Misha reached out his hand into the uncertain space between them. After a second's hesitation, Ilya placed his own dirty hand into it. The contrast was striking, clean cuff against torn sleeve, polished shoes against cracked sneakers. Then eat with me, Misha said. The courtyard seemed to inhale sharply. Victor opened his mouth to object, protocol, security, reputation, but something stopped him. He looked at his son's face. There was no fear there. Only openness. Bring him a plate, Victor said firmly to the nearest waiter. The man hesitated, glancing at the mud-streaked boy, then hurried off. Ilya stared at Victor, suspicion flickering in his eyes. Why? He demanded. Victor met his gaze. Because my son asked. That answer surprised even him. They moved to one of the long dining tables. The guests watched, unsure whether to remain or retreat. Some quietly slipped away, uncomfortable with the shift in atmosphere. Others stayed, drawn by something deeper than spectacle. A plate was placed before Ilya, roasted chicken, bread, vegetables, a slice of cake. For a moment, he just stared at it. Then hunger took over. He ate quickly, hands shaking slightly. Not delicately, not politely, desperately. Misha listened to every sound. Is it good? He asked. Ilya nodded before remembering. Yes. What does it look like? The chicken is brown. Shiny. Like the top of fresh bread. Misha smiled. I remember that color. As Ilya continued eating, he slowed gradually. The immediate panic of hunger eased. He became aware of how he must look, mud-stained, devouring food under crystal chandeliers. Embarrassment crept in. You can eat as much as you want, Victor said quietly. Ilya looked up, startled by the absence of anger in the man's voice. Why aren't you mad? He asked. Victor considered the question carefully. He had been furious. Moments earlier he had wanted the boy thrown out, perhaps even arrested. But watching Misha laugh at something messy and unexpected, had cracked something inside him. When my son lost his sight, Victor said slowly. I thought I could fix it with money. Ilya listened despite himself. I can't, Victor continued. But maybe I can fix other things. The words were unfamiliar, humbling. Misha reached for his glass of water, missing slightly. Ilya instinctively adjusted it into his hand. Their fingers brushed again. You said it's purple, Misha murmured. The sky. Yeah, describe it better. Ilya frowned, looking up once more. It's like, when a bruise is healing. Dark but kind of soft at the edges. And there are tiny white dots. Stars. Misha's face lit up as if he could see them through Ilya's words. That sounds beautiful. For the first time in months, Ilya felt something other than survival. He felt useful. The gala never returned to its previous rhythm. The music did not resume immediately. Conversations shifted in tone. Laughter became quieter, more thoughtful. Some guests approached Victor cautiously. Is everything under control? One asked. Yes, Victor replied simply. But he knew something was no longer under his control. Inside him, a reckoning had begun. Later that evening, as most guests had left and the staff quietly cleared tables, Victor found Ilya sitting beside Misha near the fountain again. They were talking softly. And the fountain lights are yellow, Ilya was saying. They make the water look like melted gold. Melted gold, Misha repeated thoughtfully. Victor watched them from a distance. Two boys. One with nothing. One with everything except sight. And somehow, in that strange collision of worlds, both were giving something to the other. He approached slowly. Where do you sleep? He asked Ilya gently. The boys stiffened. Under the bridge near the old train station. Alone. Yes. Victor felt a sharp ache in his chest. Would you like to stay somewhere warm tonight? He asked. Suspicion flashed immediately. Why? Because no child should sleep under a bridge, Victor answered. Ilya searched his face for mockery or deception. He found neither. Misha squeezed Ilya's hand lightly. You can describe the morning sky to me, he said. That simple invitation carried more trust than any contract Victor had ever signed. Ilya hesitated only a moment longer. Okay. That night, instead of returning to cold concrete, Ilya was shown to a guest room within the estate. The bed alone felt unreal. Clean sheets. A window overlooking the garden. He stood in the center of the room for several minutes, unsure if he was allowed to touch anything. Down the hall, Victor sat in his study, staring at the city lights beyond the glass. His assistant knocked softly. The press is asking about the incident, she said. How would you like to respond? Victor thought of the photograph he had glimpsed earlier. Someone had captured the moment Misha held the dirty boy's hand beneath the chandeliers. Tell them, Victor said slowly, that tonight reminded me what this foundation is truly for. When the door closed, he remained alone with his thoughts. For years, he had measured success in numbers. Revenue, shares, expansion. Tonight, a hungry boy had smeared dirt across his son's face, and in doing so, had stripped away the illusion Victor had been hiding behind. He had been trying to give the world to his son. But perhaps what Misha needed was not the world polished and perfect. Perhaps he needed something real. The next morning, sunlight poured into the guest room where Ilya lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He had not slept so safely in years. A knock came at the door. Breakfast, a gentle voice called. Downstairs, Misha was already seated at the table, smiling toward the sound of approaching footsteps. Good morning, he said brightly. Ilya looked out the window first. The sky is light blue, he reported. No clouds. The sun is bright. Misha grinned. See, I told you mornings are different. Victor watched them from the doorway. And in that quiet exchange, so simple, so ordinary, he understood something profound. The night before had not been a scandal. It had been a beginning. Because sometimes, it takes a handful of dirt to reveal what truly matters.